we have a huge problem in medicine, and it is called obesity and overweight. Now let's see why this is a problem and why we have gone in the wrong direction to actually identifying it and treating it. Now I'm going to use an interesting concept from old traditions, and I'm going to connect this to artificial intelligence. Watch as we go along in this video. Now, what is the problem with obesity? See, it is not, we get confused, we get sidetracked by these terms called obesity or overweight. The problem is not about obesity, the problem is about what is a healthy weight versus unhealthy weight. At what weight an individual is considered to be harboring unhealthy weight. Why unhealthy weight is important? Because way back in the 1800s and in the 1900s, insurance companies started, when they were recruiting or when they were registering citizens, people into their annuities and company, it started with the annuities company and then later spread to the insurance company. When they were registering people for life insurance and medical insurance, they wanted to know if the person is healthy or unhealthy. Obviously a person who is already unhealthy at the time of registration into the insurance policy, they would have a higher premiums, right? Because they are unhealthy, they would need more medical needs or more medical treatments in future. So obviously the insurance company doesn't want to lose their profits on these individuals, and so they wanted to identify people who are unhealthy. The best way they came up with was, what is an unhealthy weight for an, see, at that time malnutrition was a problem, right? At the time, because the communicable diseases were very rampant. At the time there was no insulin, there was no antibiotics, so all these problems that cause malnutrition, it was a huge problem. So they wanted to identify at what weight is an individual unhealthy. After the Second World War, when people started, their income started going up and industrialization was picking up, the problem of overweight started surfacing. So the insurance companies needed a tool to identify people whose weight is unhealthy and can cause health problems. At that point, they used what's called a Quetelet index. This was an index that was developed in the 1800s by a scientist, or he's not a scientist actually, he's a statistician named Adolf Quetelet, where he took certain metrics based on the person's weight and height and came up with a metric with a number based on the patient's height and weight, and said if a person's height and weight is so and so, and they may have health problems in the future. This has nothing to do with healthy weight. It has something to do with the patient's height and weight and predicting. See, medicine is all about predicting future events based on the current situation, right? It could be, future could be the next hour, the future could be 20 years from now. So a Quetelet index was developed, height and weight charts were created based on that, and then the insurance companies started using that to profile individuals who are at risk for health problems. So they used that, and later, fast forward to 1900s, in 1970s, I think it is 1972 or around that, an American physiologist named Ansel Keys, 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 developed or used this Quetelet index and came up with another term called body mass index, BMI. So this is weight and height, the ratio of weight per meter square, kilogram per meter square. You take the person's weight in kilograms, divided by their height in meters, and come up with a certain number called body mass index. So, and Ansel Keys revived this lost Quetelet index and renamed it called BMI and used it to stratify individuals and say that, if the individual's BMI is above a certain number, for example 25, if the BMI is about 25, then they are overweight. If they are above 30, they are obese. And it kept going on: obesity stage 1, obesity stage 2, stage 3, and morbidly obese if they are above 40. So this is how the whole healthy weight concept got screwed up by using a metric that only measures a person's weight and height and has nothing to do with what actually goes on within the body. So now, what is obesity by definition, either by WHO, World Health Organization definition, or endocrinology societies or obesity associations? It does not say anything about the person's size or height, but it talks about the person's adipose tissue. If a person has abnormal adipose tissue that is dysfunctional and is causing either physical problems, mental problems, or psychological problems, or functional problems. For example, physical problem is a person with abnormal adipose tissue can have sleep apnea, they can have arthritis, or an example for functional problem is a person with abnormal adipose tissue can have what is called a fatty liver, and that can progress to, in rare situations, into cirrhosis or liver failure. A person can have abnormal fat and can cause cholesterol problems. It can obstruct the blood vessels and blockade and create blockages and cause strokes and heart attacks. It can also cause depression. So there are so many ways abnormal dysfunctional adipose tissue can create future problems or health problems. So this is actually obesity. Obesity is not about a person's height or weight. It has to do with the person's dysfunctional fat tissue. Now listen to this. This is a very interesting thing that most of us don't know, is that you can have fatty liver, you can have fat deposition in almost all organs in the body. And the pathway is a common pathway. It's abnormal fatty cell dysfunction, where a normal fat cell goes rogue and becomes sick. So you can have fatty liver. Most of us know that fatty liver is a common problem in the industrial age, where it is for replacing alcohol as the cause of the fatty liver, or the cause of liver failure. Fatty liver, you can have fatty pancreas that can cause pancreatic cell dysfunction, and it may cause diabetes. We saw fatty liver, fatty pancreas. You can have fatty heart that can cause problems with your heart tissue and heart failure. You can even have fatty gut, where fat cells can deposit and cause problems within your gut. In fact, when you do a CAT scan of the abdomen, when the radiologist reads it as a fatty gut, that they warn you of a developing inflammatory bowel disease. Inflammatory bowel disease is an autoimmune problem. So a fatty gut can predispose you, or is a warning sign that you may be developing inflammatory bowel disease, which is an autoimmune disease. So you can have fat deposition in multiple organs. You can have fat deposition in the blood vessels. So you can have multiple problems because of the dysfunctional fat tissue. Now, how do you measure all this? Unfortunately, as of now, the way we are practicing medicine, there is no reliable means to measure fat cell dysfunction. Now let me introduce you to an interesting concept that was used or still in use in a system called Indian School of Logic. Indian School of Logic, also called Tarka or Nyaya. Tarka or Indian school of logic uses, I mean, it's a vast subject, but I'm going to take a small fraction of that, a sliver of that knowledge, and see if we can use that to solve our problem, or at least to try and understand if we can find solutions to our problem of obesity. Now, in Tarka or Indian school of knowledge or Indian school of logic, we have a concept called pramana. Pramana is a valid means of knowledge. Let us say we want to analyze or study a particular subject or a particular thing or a particular concept. So we need knowledge about that, right? For example, obesity. We want to understand, we want some knowledge about fat cell dysfunction or sick fat. Now, what are the means of knowledge? How do you obtain knowledge to study this subject or problem or to come up with solutions? According to Tarka, there are numerous means of obtaining knowledge. For instance, there is pratyaksha or direct observation, pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, ardhapatti, anupalabdhi, shabda, and so on. So pratyaksha is direct knowledge. You actually examine, let us take the example of fat cell. You take the fat cell, directly examine under a microscope, or you take MRIs and CAT scans, and you can actually see the fatty liver, you can see fatty pancreas, you can see fat in the gut, and by direct observation, either structurally or microscopically, you examine the fat cell under a microscope, and you can see structural changes within the fat cell. A normal fat cell versus an abnormal fat cell, you can actually observe it, where you can see inflammation or inflammatory entities within the fat cell structure, and you can directly observe it, called pratyaksha. So this is one valid means of knowledge. And then there is a second valid means of knowledge called pratyaksha anumana or inference. By inference, you can tell whether a fat cell is normal or dysfunctional, which is by definition the obesity, but which is the definition of obesity. So how do you know if a fat cell is abnormal? By inference. Sometimes you cannot directly observe it. The fat cell may look normal, or you might want to use both pratyaksha and anumana, direct observation. And for instance, you want to know what are the problems that a dysfunctional fat cell can create. The liver has abnormal fat cell called fatty liver, right? What is the problem that's causing it? Why are you so worried about it? By inference, by doing a certain biochemical test called liver function test or some other test, you understand because of the fatty liver, you have this abnormal functioning liver. You put these two together, you create a causation or you create a correlation between these two. Ideally, you want to have a causation. Sometimes it's not possible because there are so many factors that are playing in: genetics, environmental factors, psychosocial factors, political factors that are creating not policy factors that are creating the guidelines may be causing this problem. So we'll come to that eventually. But you want to know by inference if the fatty liver is actually causing the problems that you know of. So pratyaksha, anumana, so upamana by comparison, upamana, ardhapatti, anupalabdhi, shabda. Shabda is an interesting concept. It means already established and validated proof of knowledge. You take the validated proof, already evidence-based validated knowledge from prior studies or from prior experiences, and you use it to the current pramana or logic, and you obtain and you put all these together, you get a vast fund of knowledge, and you put this knowledge to use, and you create solutions based on this knowledge, or you take this knowledge and then put this to use and get more knowledge based on other tests. So in obesity, you can use this pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, ardhapatti, anupalabdhi, shabda wherever it is appropriate. You can combine these and obtain knowledge. Now you may be wondering, well, this is ancient knowledge, this is ancient Indian knowledge, hundreds, maybe thousands of years old knowledge. What is its relevance in the current day? Now, scientists, for example, I know scientists at Mayo Clinic, Dr. Acosta and Dr. Camilleri, for instance, they have come up with a precision medicine tool to identify, to diagnose obesity, not based on BMI, but based on multiple factors. You know, obesity is a multifactorial disease, right? It can be genetic, it can be environmental because of toxins, it can be the food you are eating, it can be your behavior, it can be due to the food policy that is being implemented in your local, regional or national level. It could be so many factors, psychological factors, undiagnosed food addiction, undiagnosed depression. It could be faulty wiring between your satiety, satiation and other things. So it can be so many things that are, so it's multifactorial. So how do you identify? How do you skin this cat, this complex phenomenon? So these two scientists at Mayo Clinic came up with a precision medicine tool to gather data, to obtain knowledge from multiple sources, from genetics, from microbiome, from metabolome, from so many ohms that you may have heard, and they gather data from patients' behavior, patients' lifestyle, their environmental influences such as environmental toxins that might be causing cellular dysfunction, and they powered all this data through machine learning tools, through precision learning technology, precision medicine, machine learning tools, also called artificial intelligence, and they have an output. So they took this output and categorized these individuals into 4 categories. So these 4 categories, let me tell you what, this is very interesting. I'll tell you how this Indian school of knowledge and the modern medicine converge and create solutions for us. You don't need to use these technical terms like pratyaksha, anumana, but if you understand the logic behind it, the reasoning behind it, it makes complete sense. So now coming back to these Mayo Clinic scientists, Dr. Acosta and Dr. Camilleri, so they created, or they stratified individuals, categorized individuals into hungry brain, people belonging to hungry brain, where they have a defect in satiation. They have, where the person's brain is unable to determine satiety, the feeling of fullness after you eat a meal. For instance, I eat a meal and I don't feel full. I keep eating and I don't feel full. After a few minutes, I feel heavy, I'm very uncomfortable, I feel like I shouldn't have done it. So this guilt sets in. It's not because they don't have a willpower, but it is because they have what is called a hungry brain, where their connections, their satiety connections are misfiring. They don't recognize that satiety. So that is category number 1. And then they have a second category called hungry gut defect, in where the individual feels hungry shortly after a meal. So the person ate the meal, they feel good, they stop the meal, and within minutes they start feeling hungry, and then they have to go and eat again. So this they call hungry gut. First is hungry brain, second is hungry gut, and the third one is emotional hunger, where the person eats for emotional needs, either depression or anxiety, success, failure. So they have this uncontrolled urge to eat for emotional needs. So that is the emotional hunger. The last one is a slow burn. This is another category of individual where they slowly burn, where their metabolism is a not defective energy metabolism. So this type of individual have lower metabolism, where they eat whatever is appropriate, for their body, but they don't metabolize it. They keep accumulating what they eat. They don't burn it well. So based on this artificial intelligence powered technology, from all the information they gathered from these individuals, they categorize these patient population into 4 and identify each individual and see what is the biological mechanism that is causing either the hungry brain, hungry gut, emotional eater, or slow metabolizers, and then create solutions specific to this particular individual. See, it is not a black and white categories. You can have individuals with hungry brain and hungry gut, mostly hungry brain, a little bit hungry gut. They may be slow metabolizers too. There is a, you can stage the individuals within each category. Let us say you pick hungry brain. You can stage their severity from a stage 0 to maybe stage 5 and say this person has moderate hungry brain dysfunction, you see. And in each category, one person can fit into multiple categories, but they may be predominantly one versus the other. So see there is an interesting concept here that these scientists at Mayo Clinic have either knowingly or unknowingly discovered. They categorize individuals based on their quality, based on their behavior, and the function or the action based on this particular behavior. For instance, the quality, a person can have a hungry brain, that is their quality, that is their characteristic, and because of that they do a certain action, which is overeating. So based on their quality and based on their action, in other words, in Indian language, in Indian Sanskrit or logic, it is called guna and karma. So based on the guna and karma vibhaga or categories, this particular individual belongs to this category. So summarizing the whole thing, it becomes very interesting because this is all Mayo Clinic 2022 artificial intelligence, precision medicine technology, and then you see this Indian logic where you identify, you have pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, ardhapatti, anupalabdhi, shabda. You gather all this knowledge, you categorize the individuals based on their guna and karma, and in each category you can have subcategories based on the severity of their problem and provide individual or personalized solutions to it. So it is very interesting when some of these techniques are used or taken, for instance, the Indian logic, some of these concepts unknowingly, this Mayo Clinic physician, I'm sure they have never heard about the school of Indian logic, but again, those concepts are very well used here and powered by artificial intelligence to provide technology based precision medicine solutions. So coming back to our problem of obesity, so if we depend on BMI, for instance, in 1988, only 18% of American US population were considered obese. Now in 2022, we have about 41 to 42% of US population being obese. So despite all the medical technology in the last 20 to 30 years, from 18% we have grown to 40%, 42%. By 2030, it is projected that the problem of obesity, the prevalence of obesity is going to go above 50%. The problem is not with obesity, because when we define obesity, we use an age-old 200-year-old concept called BMI. It is time to disrupt that concept and use artificial intelligence, precision medicine technology to gather not just one metric called BMI to diagnose an individual with obesity, but use multiple tools, multiple measurements, or multiple data, numerous data from the individuals, either it's genetics, microbiome analysis, metabolome analysis, nutrinome analysis, so all these analysis, and also genetics and environmental influence, policy issues, poverty problems, lack of access to food, all these things, lack of knowledge, lack of education, all these, and power it through artificial intelligence and obtain solutions. So the problem of obesity can only be solved with a multifactorial, multimodal approach. And I'm glad that there are disruptive technologies developed in Mayo Clinic, and if we can use some of these Indian logic systems also, we can come up with even effective solutions. I know I kept using the example of Mayo Clinic. It is a tool that was just developed in 2021 and being used now. I'm sure there are multiple such tools powered by AI all over the world, and these tools need to be validated, needs to be put to test. What is their long-term solution? How do they test the how do we test them across populations, across different, but again, it is important to disrupt the old concepts and find solutions because they're not working. So I hope you understood three things here. One is how we need disruptive technologies in obesity. Second is how we can leverage Indian school of logic in testing, in obtaining information and putting that to use based on individual characteristics like guna and karma, and coming up with solutions. And the third is educating ourselves, continuously educating ourselves, testing our knowledge and moving forward with it. Hope this information was helpful to you. I will continue to provide or provide some knowledge based on our understanding of what's current in the field of obesity, in the field of precision medicine, and we'll move along. So till we meet next time, stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you.